Hey, welcome into the Sunday side session. I am Mike Schaefer and joined this week to talk about Nebraska's 30-27 loss to Michigan is 16-20 the zones. Gary Sharp. Gary, I wanted a big guest for a
Huh.
big game, and so now we can have a big conversation. That was I I am struggling. I don't even know how many hours later. When did that game actually end? Like 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Felt like it ended like 7 times before it actually ended, but 6 o'clock. So let's say it's, 14 hours later here. Not entirely sure where my head is at with everything, but that's why we have the Sunday side session. So we can talk through it. We can figure out our thoughts on Nebraska football, both in the short term and the long term, in just perfect Nebraska fashion. This occurs right before the bye week. So we get
Yeah.
to hit with this feeling for 2 weeks. And so, as a content machine yourself, I'm sure you are excited for 2 weeks of discussing where this program is. But you get to start it here on a Sunday. So I added an extra,
I do.
which should have been an off day for you, what should have been a thinking about Russell Wilson and Tyrone Tracy and Cam Scattaboo and Malik Neighbors and
Thank
old
you.
friend Wandale Robinson. Now I've got you thinking about Nebraska football on your day off. So I apologize for that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you as always having me on. I thought this would be under different circumstances. I think I
I
always
think we
come
both
on
did.
after a loss like this. I don't know,
Yeah,
you're
because I
right.
save you
Like
for big games, and then Nebraska loses big games. So I guess if
Chafe,
next year looking at it, if they're playing some MAC school, we can switch it up if you want. I think that's why
can I
Happer
put in
snuck in for Akron. I really
can
do.
I put in can I put in for Bowling Green?
Yeah, let's do it. Are
Um
they still gonna
well,
have
I
Eddie
mean,
George as our coach?
yeah. I mean, 28 straight against ranked teams, 3-1 in one score games, and you're right. Like 12 hours later or whatever the time is, it was such an uneven game. Like Nebraska should have lost that game by 3 touchdowns. But yet
Yep.
they had a
Could
chance
have
to
won
win
the
the game.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
multiple different
So
times.
it's such an uneven game that reminded you that they're not ready for primetime Big 10 player in the way that Big 10 really good teams win. And I don't the reason I picked Nebraska, and I had Nebraska winning 24-21 because it wasn't necessarily about Nebraska. It was more about this isn't the vintage Michigan team that we've gotten used to. And I thought playing them in the fourth game of the year was a great opportunity to catch them because, they may turn around and they may go on a run here. They're going to probably be favored until they get, outside of USC. I mean, they could go 10-1 before they get to the meeting against Ohio State. We never know. But what an uneven game is, yeah, you could have lost by 3 touchdowns. You also could have had opportunities to win. But the frustrating part is Nebraska got beat in football 101, blocking and
Yeah.
tackling.
I mean, I just to add to kind of what you said there, and this was sort of a thing that was popping up on the message board and on Twitter and everywhere else. It's like, well, who actually thought Nebraska was going to win this game several months ago? And I like put my hand up. It was me.
Yeah.
As the schedule came out, and certainly when Sharon Moore chose these two games as games to not be there, it just felt like this was a great opportunity for Nebraska to catch a Michigan team that wasn't going to be fully functioning at this point in time. I think this team that Michigan has is going to be a lot better. Like whoever plays them in November is
Mm-hmm.
going to get a better
Yep.
football team than the one that Nebraska got on September 20th. And so because of that, I thought Nebraska was equipped to be able to compete. I thought Nebraska
Agree.
was going to be able to do things that would give Michigan problems. I thought Nebraska's passing game was going to be an issue for Michigan, and it was to a point. But I never gave enough credit to a front seven that I thought lost multiple players to the NFL, that their 245-pound edge players could just shove back a 310-pound tackle every single play of the game without any extra help. I I mean, if I had to start anywhere in this game, it's not even Nebraska's run defense, which is sort of how I spent all week talking about it. You,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think Nebraska was going to be great against a run, but I didn't think that would prevent them from being able to win the game. And even after giving up 280 plus yards, Gary, I am willing to sit here and tell you that Nebraska still could have won that game despite Michigan running for 12 whatever a carry. All of it if they simply played better on offense.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do that when you can't block 3-man fronts and 4-man fronts with 5 offensive linemen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they weren't
I
willing to commit the extra tight ends in that game because they needed them for outlets for Luke Lindemeyer, because the receivers weren't necessarily always getting open either.
No. And I think another thing is Harburg is not a great run blocker. So
No.
having him on the field, even as an extra guy, I mean, Corcoran was almost the better guy to have out as an additional player. Let's go back to Michigan running the ball, because that was a major concern. And there are things that, and I'm going to say this on my show, and I'll say it here. There are things that we know about Nebraska going into yesterday that I still feel the same way. Like, it's going to be a work in progress of the defensive line. But they ran 33 times for 286 yards, 8.7 a carry, 7 runs for 221. And if you look at the long runs, and especially the 3 scores, was it they just got physically outmanned at the point of contact, or was it a mistake? Was it a mistake that a linebacker followed Marshall on quarters coverage, and all of a sudden the middle of the field is wide open and Underwood can just run right down the middle of the field? Is it bad run fits? Buford had a bad day. He had a bad day. There were some defensive ends on run fits that had a bad day, and they got gashed. The one drive that I think is the most demoralizing and reminds you that you're not ready for prime time when it comes to winning in the Big Ten in the trenches is that drive in the fourth quarter. But on the other side, you're absolutely right. The screenshots and the film study for tackles is not going to be good, because Michigan was rushing 4 and they were pushing the tackles into the backfield. And Dylan already has a challenge with that when things are at his feet, and it just compounded it. I did not foresee that coming, that physically they would get manhandled like they did. Kudos to Michigan. They were a stronger team. And as Biff Poggi said after the game, we just beat the snot out of them. I mean, that's a little startling if you're Corey Campbell and if you're Matt Rule.
Well, and they felt like, right, wrong, or indifferent, and it certainly didn't show up, but they felt like they've spent multiple years building their offensive line to be able to handle these situations. But and these are your 2 starters. These are your guys. These are the ones that you left fall camp with as your left tackle and your right tackle. Gunnar Katula and Teddy Prohaska couldn't hold up at any point against just straight. And we're not even talking, Gary, like swim moves or NFL level stunts or just outstanding Wink Martindale disguised blitzes or anything like that. They just went right at them. And it's, hey, if you step a little bit too far outside, I'll go through you underneath. Or if you don't extend your foot far enough outside, I'll go around you. Or, and perhaps the worst part of it, it doesn't matter. I'll go right through you over and over and over. And that's really difficult. I mean, it is really, really difficult to have a functional offense. And some of it's, they had 7 sacks. Some of it's on Dylan. I mean, Dylan could get the ball out faster than he did at times. I felt like he was not even a word. I felt like he wasn't confident in what he was seeing at times. I don't know that Dana Holgerson helped him a ton, because there would be some route combinations where you had 4 guys running 4-yard routes. Like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
They have 7 in coverage because they can rush 4, and you have 4 guys standing 4 yards away from the line of scrimmage, in part because you can't get your offensive line to protect. But where's he supposed to go with that ball? Dylan doesn't like to throw the ball away, which is a big red flag for a quarterback. And it's something he has to break. Like, he has to get better at it. His completion percentage doesn't matter if you're taking a 7-yard sack on 2nd down. You probably wiped your team out from getting the 3rd down. So he has to be better about that. And at the same time, and this is what's absolutely scary, if he hadn't lost 15 pounds in the offseason, had made himself slimmer and gotten a little bit better in terms of movement, that could have been a double-digit sack day easy. I mean, how many times did he have to escape pressure just to dump the ball off or just to make something happen? And he's not going to get credit for it because all anyone's going to see is the 7 sacks and, oh, Dylan's not athletic enough and they need a more running quarterback to do things and yada, yada, yada. I don't care who you put back there. they were going to get destroyed with that offensive line play, and particularly with the tackles. And again, they only had to send 4. And not every team's going to be able to do that in the future against Nebraska, but at the same time, that's not something that just gets fixed because you're going to play more games. Like,
Well,
you're going to have an issue with pressure all season long. So how are you going to mitigate it as an offense? That becomes Dana Holgerson's whole bye-week task.
And not being able to fix it because it's the combination of Nebraska doesn't have athletic offensive tackles. They have kind of plotters. And if you're going to have a non-mobile quarterback, man, not having athletic tackles, that is a recipe for disaster when you face a guy like Barham, who Nebraska doesn't have that guy on their roster. I mean, he was moving him from linebacker to edge was such a brilliant idea for Michigan, and he caused havoc. The other thing about Dylan, and you know what? And Dylan wasn't the problem. I mean, when they were clean at his feet and Dylan had a little bit of time and they went with that quick game, Nebraska's offense moved a little bit. They felt like they were in a rhythm. But Dylan's thing is, Dylan's clock in his head, I don't think exists because Dylan won't step up into the pocket consistently. And then he does another thing that drives me nuts is he backs up. Like he'll back up into, and again, you as a quarterback don't expect your tackles to be pushed 4 or 5 yards right back into your lap, but he'll step back into that. So the cognizant of things that are around him in the pocket still is a work in progress. And all of those combinations on a day like yesterday just leads to disaster. I mean, it was such an uneven football game, which, you go back and you wonder, man, that opening drive, they had some sneaky plays. That scripted stuff looked good. They were doing things to catch Michigan off guard, and then it just came to a halt. And in a game where you need points, and I know this is, for some, this is hey, it happened. He was aggressive. He went for it. I don't know. I think in these kind of games where you're playing for points, that was important. But don't you believe at the end of the day, as Rule was standing in front of the media yesterday, he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams that physically they would get as dominated as they did and completely throw their game plan out the window.
No, Nebraska never saw this coming. And there's going to be plenty in the fan base that are going to stand up and tell you, I mean, this is exactly what we thought that we were going to see from Michigan and everything under the sun. And that might be true, but Nebraska did not go into that game thinking they were going to get physically beat up by Michigan. They felt like they had prepared themselves for years to be at the point where they could stand up to a Michigan team.
Yep.
And I think the thing that is difficult is that you lost by 3 points. There's no shortage of plays in there that you can kind of look at and be like, well, if this goes like this, and Michigan can do the same thing. I mean, they could be like, well, we could have won this game.
The double pass. Yeah.
I mean, the double pass, and then the next play was a drop, right? Like they basically had like almost back-to-back touchdowns that didn't occur. And Nebraska can look at that first drive and 2nd and 3. And I really wish Dana Holgerson would just put this away. Stop throwing fades or fade-like plays into it's not working. Like it felt like that grinded that to a halt because then you're going to turn around and it's 3rd and 3. You're giving the ball to Emmett Johnson with an offensive line that you wouldn't know it at this point in the game because it's a first drive. But you weren't getting pushed against Houston Christian and Akron in those situations. So how are you going to do it against Michigan?
Yeah.
And I actually like the shovel pitch play, not just because I had predicted on the Hypecast that they were going to score a touchdown that way. But it's a good play, but Nebraska doesn't get interior push. Like, like you said something about Nebraska not having athletic tackles. I'm going to say something that everyone listening at home is just going to nod and agree with. For like over a decade, all Nebraska has rolled out for their offensive line are guards. They never have tackles. Never once in the last decade have you been like, well, that guy is clearly an NFL tackle or he is a cornerstone tackle. I mean, Teddy Prohaska was supposed to be that, but his career was so derailed by injuries. And I think it's incredibly admirable. He's still playing, and at times it looks like he can be, pretty serviceable for you out there. But they don't. I mean, who's the last like legitimate tackle that Nebraska has had at the college level? I mean, you've had guys like Jeremiah Searles and Matt Farniok and Brandon Hymus and Nick Gates that have all played it. And then they go to the NFL and they're all interior.
They play a different position. Yeah.
Like you just don't have, is it Marcel Jones? Are we going back to Marcel Jones on this?
It's a while.
Like 6'8" 8 with an afro and working at the Grand with his little bow tie there, sweeping up stuff at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, I it that is one of those damning things. It's also why on the sidelines before the game, they had quite a few tackles in town because they need them.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
just don't get them. And then Claude Puma, who absolutely just dwarfed every Nebraska coach that went over there to see him. I mean, he is a huge, huge player for Nebraska. They have to keep him, but then they also have to develop him, which is a concern
Yeah.
because, we're in year 4 of Donovan Raiola, and it's hard to point at other than Justin Evans, which plays the same position that Donovan Raiola used to. I think he's clearly your best offensive lineman. I think he's clearly the best example of recent development of offensive linemen. Gunnar Katula has been solid, but I think we all feel like he's probably a guard that's playing tackle.
Yeah. No,
And
I think that
unfortunately, there's more guys like that on the roster. Grant Bricks is probably a guard, but he's going to need to play tackle.
No, I think that's a great observation. And I mean, I'd rather have the development of high school linemen than going into the portal every year because Nebraska has chased the big time athletic offensive tackle and they haven't been able to win. And so, then they
They're
get
not spending
Pritchett.
$3.5 million on a tackle, and they're not going to.
Yeah, and maybe that's a philosophy that when you play a game like yesterday, you're reminded, hey, if we're going to do this, we're either going to win a big time recruiting battle to get a true tackle, or we're going to have to spend up because you're going to get Dylan killed. I mean, just not having athletic tackles to be able to handle rushes like that, and then just physically one-on-one. Nebraska, the simple things yesterday, Nebraska didn't do well. And those are the things that are the difference of making that jump where, you want some validation for the process is like the little details that just escaped them yesterday. Guys making a play when they had a chance to make a play. It was just, again, I go back, Schaefer, to me, it was such an uneven game. I go back and I say, okay, it was 17-17 at halftime, but in reality, the Hail Mary kind of clouded over some stuff that was, at the surface, and you're like, uh-oh, danger zone. But yet it was 17-17, and you're like, man, Nebraska has lost so many of these games in the past. They might trick one off today. They might not be the better team, but they're going to find a way to get a bounce or a late drive or a turnover or something, and they're going to win a one-score game in a game that you go, man, how did they ever win that? And those are the kind of games where you turn the corner. You win games that in the past you've lost and you haven't played exceptionally well, and you beat a team, and you're like, okay, we're not going to, do a victory lap, but gosh, we won a football game. Now what can we learn from this? It was another frustrating day that I don't think changes drastically the outcome of the season because there's not a lot of defensive lines or offensive lines that are going to be Michigan-like that you're going to see on the schedule. But this becomes about Nebraska. And it becomes Nebraska in 25 and Nebraska in the future on, okay, what did we learn yesterday? And what do we have to do when it comes to developing and recruiting? And do we have the right players and the right people in place to do that?
Yeah, after the game, and you're up there, you're hanging around waiting for Matt Rule to talk, and he talks, and then I'm working, and I'm close to finishing up, and Steve Sipple is sitting down there writing his column, and I just kind of go over there because I had this thought, and I was curious where he was at with it, and it was largely how much of today did you feel like was Michigan, and how much of today did you feel like was Nebraska? And there's a certain portion of this I don't want to take anything away from Michigan because they were good. Like they came out and they executed what they wanted to do, and they largely controlled this game. And so they deserved the win. I don't want to minimize that. And yet at the same time, there's just this nagging nature of when I watch Nebraska football in these sort of games, it's the team in the mirror that is the problem for them more than the team that is across the field. And you mentioned that 17-17, they start the second half, and there's 5 plays in the second half that to me tell the story of why Nebraska football is where it is and where it has been for the last decade plus and isn't where it wants to be. And it's because when given opportunity, when having a chance to do something, more often than not, the wrong thing happens. And we can just kind of go through these, and it starts right there. At the beginning of the third quarter, you get that stop around midfield. And Ja'Cory Barney, who had otherwise a pretty excellent game, is so confident that he's catching a punt at the 3-yard line. Like, just let it go. If that drive starts at the 20 instead of at the 3, one, who knows how Nebraska plays it out? They still got 9 yards. They nearly escaped and picked up a first down and got further out. And then, of course, the 5-yard delay of game, which I don't know. I doubt that was intentional, but that felt weird that even happened that way. But so then they're forced to punt from in their own territory, allows Michigan to sit on them. Michigan ends up getting the field goal, if I recall this correctly. So that's one. Later in the game, you have another punt opportunity. And again, Nebraska is hanging in there. They're making this thing a game. And Ja'Cory Barney catches it, and he has room to run. Like, he had space in front of him. It's DeMornay Pearsonell versus Oregon in my mind down there on the at
if he gets to the edge.
And he just loses it. I don't even know that he got tripped up. It felt like he just lost his footing. And he goes down. And so instead of starting that drive at, your own 45 or their 45 or wherever he ends up, you're starting at the 33, and then there's a sack, and then the drive ends. I can't promise if they're going to score, but it's just, so there's two examples on special teams. Got to make a play. Didn't happen. Another one. How did Isaiah Hunter end up out of bounds? You want to talk about one of the better individual situational awareness from Dylan? Dylan was incredible in that moment. Like, if you go back and you just watch from the angle of him, his ability to escape everything, flush to the right, he gets that throw off about a nanosecond before he gets tackled, and he puts it where it needs to be to a wide open guy in the end zone that he has no idea stepped out of bounds.
Yeah.
And there's no reason. It was unprompted that unforced that he stepped out of bounds.
And I imagine that there will be a conversation about he is not looking down. He's at a peripheral vision. And so he thinks he's running in the red is when that is happening, because you know what Nebraska's end zones look like.
Right.
But once you get past the boundary, they're still red.
Yep.
Okay. So probably, and I'm not excusing him because that's terrible situational awareness. And you're absolutely right about Dylan making a play. But the two things that you've illustrated, Schaefer, is Nebraska needs to be better in the margins. We're seeing
absolutely,
we're seeing like Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is having success, but they're playing well in the margins. Nebraska wasn't able to do that yesterday. And it also involves complementary football. You're spot on about the beginning of the second half. So you're probably thinking, how are we 17-17? Because it was 10-0, and we're like, man, this is going to be like 23 all over again. You come out, your defense makes a stop. So there's no complimentary football.
Terrific play from Vincent Shavers, by the way, on diagnosing that screen pass on third down. Gets the rare one-on-one tackle. I think it was Justice Haynes who caught it.
Yep. From start to finish, because he noticed in snap. He never moved. They tried to move him with a little bit of motion, and he never moved because he knew what his assignment was. From snap to finish, it was a great play. But then there's no complimentary football where the defense, and to gain momentum, then you're going, oh, for God's sake, Barney, you're not taught this. And then what did it do? It allowed Michigan to get good field position, and they made you pay when they kicked a field goal. So you're playing that back and forth instead of, smart play. And so they weren't doing well in the margins. And then when guys would make, there were very few times yesterday when guys would make great individual plays, they got rewarded. That Dylan play. Dylan made a couple of those plays that they just could not, add on. I imagine you're also going to go to this, and I think this is another part that you're reminded of yesterday. You're reminded when you watch Michigan, Nebraska. You're reminded when you watch Indiana. Teams have to establish an identity, and they have to live by that code. Michigan's identity is we're going to be physical. We're going to run the football, okay? They know when they get off the bus, they're going to do that every single Saturday. That's what we're going to do. If you can't stop us, you're not going to beat us. Indiana's identity is they win, okay? They find any way to win. They got an edge. They play angry. They win. Nebraska's still searching for that identity, their identity of this is who we'd like to be, but then we're not there yet. And I think the identity, which just hit home, and Nebraska doesn't have it yet, Michigan has it, is, and I think you were going here, the fourth quarter. The clock says, and I wrote this down, what it had, 12:54 on the clock. And almost 9 minutes later, the drive is over. And they convert a third and 5, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. Not third and short, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10.
Yeah, and the third, so the last two just like critical You had an opportunity to make a play or to get out of your own way, and you couldn't. 3rd and 5, all Sierra Wright has to do is get him out of bounds. All he has
And
to
they
do
blew,
is
and
get
they
him out of
remember
bounds.
they
And they're
blew
on the
up that
sideline.
play too. Yeah, they blew up that play. It was a great job by Nebraska diagnosing it, and they blew it up. All they need to do is make a tackle.
Yep. And then the very next opportunity, 3rd and 9, Deshaun McCullough, just break down, slow him down, allow the guys to rally, and he just runs, over pursues it, which has been a Nebraska issue for linebackers for a while. And so then that one's converted. And then now you're just trying to get a stop so you can force a field goal because you need time on the clock. Like you need to be able to operate with more time. And it's 3rd and 10, and they just run an inside draw and they pick up 14 yards on you. Like I don't know that it was 14, but it felt like it was 14. And it just, those first two, though, you had guys in the right position. And this is the difference of Nebraska and Michigan. It doesn't have to do with culture or physicality or identity or any of it. When it was time for a Michigan guy to make a play, he made a play. When it was time for Nebraska to make a play, they found excuses, mistakes, and didn't get it done. Not all the time. Yeah. But when you're talking about the margins, and when we're talking about Nebraska, and we're talking about the run defense, and you can bottle them up for 60 to 70% of what they're doing, but the other 30%, because your run fits are bad or your tackling is poor, that's on you. That's Nebraska. That's not Michigan. Michigan blocks stuff well. They've got a fine offensive line, but that isn't the 2023 offensive line. That's not the 2023 defense. And yet it doesn't matter because and this is why the really successful teams in the NFL, and I use this example all the time, and it's not just because you're a Chiefs fan on here, but I go back to the 2024 or 2025 AFC Championship game, and the Chiefs have backup defensive players coming in, and when those guys are in, they make a play. They're not Chris Jones. They're not the starters. They're not the guys that are expected to do it. There was a defensive lineman who came in and just got into Josh Allen's face, blew up a play on a critical 3rd down, and their teammates celebrated him like he was the best player on the field when he got to the sidelines, because that's what you do when you're a Kansas City Chiefs player in January and you're on the field. You're there to make a play. When you're a Michigan player in September in Memorial Stadium, you're on the field, you make the damn tackle. You make the play. You get off the field. Nebraska doesn't do that. And it has nothing to do with culture, identity, podcasts, any of this bullshit that we have to hear all the time. Go make the play. There's almost another word that got dropped in there. But, like, that is what's frustrating about this. Yeah. We can talk about analytics. We can talk about yards per rush. We can talk about offensive linemen. We can talk about recruiting. We can talk about coaches named Biff. We can talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about. When you're on the damn field, you got to make plays. And too often in the last decade plus, Nebraska doesn't make plays. And then on a day where they do somehow end up with a couple, Ja'Cory Barney pulling a Hail Mary out of the air at the end of the first half, you have 15 other counter examples of where they can't get it done. And that's why they're losing. And that's why today we're having this conversation instead of the Nebraska's 4-0 going into a bye week. But, man, look at that schedule ahead. There's some challenging games here. Michigan State's not going anywhere. Maryland just beat Wisconsin and Camp Randall. And sure, Luke Fickell's guys look like they're lost, but that's still a nice win for Mike Locksley and the Terps. Now you have all of that, and you just lost to Michigan, and you have to question whether you're ready to go do this. And in the 3rd year of this program, I don't think it's unfair for the fan base, the media, whoever, to expect you to do simple things like not catching a punt inside the 5-yard line, simple things like making a guy miss when you have a one-on-one opportunity on the outside, simple things like making a tackle when you're a 5th-year or 4th-year player and you're brought here to go make a tackle. Make a damn play. Like, that's Nebraska football in a nutshell. For over a decade, aren't making plays. Is it in the margins? Absolutely. Is it out loud screaming at us every Saturday? Yes. And I'm just sort of like tired of finding and inventing reasons to have these conversations when it comes down to there's only so much the coaches can do on the sidelines. There's only so much that they can do for you. It's the guys that wear the jerseys with the Nebraska on the front and their name on the back and the numbers. And I'm not talking about Bud Crawford's 168 because that was badass. They got to make plays. And it just doesn't happen enough. And I don't think that there's no words that's going to make that happen. It's internal. It's in you to go do it. And they just didn't. and they're going to have opportunities to go forward, and the season isn't over, and that's a big part of this. But for this to change, for Nebraska to get out of this loop, you got to make plays. We've been
Yeah, and
talking
that
about this since 2019.
very, very well said. I agree
Sorry,
with. I
I
agree
blacked out.
wholeheartedly. I know, and I was worried about you, and I'm worried about your ticker now.
We're
You
pretty
are spot on. It just guys got to make a play in space, and they couldn't do it consistently. And I think Michigan makes plays when it matters most because
And
guys have
it's
done
all
that.
the guys on
Yeah.
the field.
Yep.
It's
And
not just their best players.
guys have done that in the past. When it's time to make a play that matter the most, they're able to make a play. And Nebraska just has not done that consistently. And when you're playing a team like Michigan, whether this is really good Michigan, Michigan, not vintage Michigan, whatever Michigan is, it's still Michigan, is your margin for error is so small until you cross that barrier and you start to build a buffer that you could, stub your toe a couple of times during a game and you're going to be fine. It's just that's why when you have a chance to have an attitude at the beginning of the game and set a precedent, man, those points, if Nebraska, even if they're up 3-0, you're like, okay, would have been nice to get 6, but they got 3. Here we go, game on, and you never know because they had another opportunity right after that. But
Yeah, well, and that's Kyle Cunanan. It's just a horrible time for him to miss hit a
yeah,
football. That's all that happened.
yeah,
I still believe he's a good kicker, but he just mishit a football,
mm-hmm.
and that's what their kicker can trot onto the field and just knock down a 56. It would have been good. That that kick might have been good from like 65 yards. And it's not that Michigan's perfect. I want to make that clear too. They had drops, they had mistakes, they had things that didn't go well for them. But it just feels like there's an inherent belief when they're on the football field that one of the 11 is going to get it done.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Nebraska carries themselves that way. They can have false bravado. They can have games where they beat up on Akron and Houston Christian, and they can talk about what they've done well. But when push comes to shove and it's 1v1, it just doesn't feel like Nebraska's winning.
And it also looked yesterday. So, I thought Nebraska was wound too tight at the beginning of the game, especially on defense. Guys had bad run fits that they weren't just off by a hair. They were off by a large margin. And some guys that have played a lot of football at Nebraska just technically were not in the right spot. And I'm thinking there's no way they rep that during the week that you would be there while Haynes or Underwood is going that way. It's the difference between where Michigan has been and will be and where Nebraska would like to be and the reality of where Nebraska is. I mean, football 101 yesterday. And going back to something you said, there's no excuses. These are a lot of facts. In the past you could go, well, PTSD and their one-score games and guys didn't, they got beaten football 101 yesterday. And that I don't know as a competitor, as a player, if that sucks even more is, we didn't get like out schemed. We just got beaten football one-on-one on mono. And how do you correct that moving forward? Is that internally? Is that externally? That's the question now as the season moves along. That's got a lot of football to play. And you still feel good about this team. I mean, there's still some good things there. You could see yesterday that they have made progress. They just haven't made enough when you're trying to beat a team like Michigan that opens the door for you. I'll keep going back to that, Schaefer. Michigan left the door open in a weird game for Nebraska to take advantage of it, and Nebraska never did.
Yeah. It's one of those where if they play that game 10 times, I'm not entirely sure Nebraska can go 5-5 on it. They lost on Saturday. It's probably 7-3, like as bad as that sounds. I think the gap is still pretty pronounced from where Michigan is as a upper echelon helmet in the Big Ten with maybe a slightly above average team for their own standards. And Nebraska's not there yet. And I have some real reservation about when they're going to get there as a program, because there's the other part of this, and you mentioned it with the offensive tackles, but also just look slow in the back end. I mean, the gap that Justice Haynes could put between Nebraska and the secondary that was chasing them on some of those, not great. Like your safeties, Nebraska might have some of the slowest safeties in the Big Ten. just based on what it looked like yesterday at times. Because when he got through, I mean, he was putting yards between him and them as he was running to the end zone. They looked slow, and some of that I'm sure is just being out of position or a little bit being rocked. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what Nebraska's answer is coming out of this. What'd you think of what Matt Rule had to say after the game?
I think he hit the right tones because they still have a long season to go, and
Yeah, and that's
he's still
important.
positive about this season. It's just, would you rather have had this game towards the back end of the season or now to get a reality check?
I think I think
I,
there's ways that this can be a positive, and that's why I
yeah.
think it was a difficult thing to discuss 18 or 14 hours later, because it's not all bad. And
Mhm.
yet at the same time, it was a measuring stick game and you came up short.
And
And yeah,
that's
they lost by 3 points, but it's tough to always see Nebraska
yeah.
come up short and then continue to think that eventually they're going to be the little engine that could.
Yeah, and yesterday was ripe for that. I mean, to have that game where you finally the process gets validated and you go, okay, now you got rewarded for it. I mean, we don't see the internal workings of guys putting in the work and what are they doing on a day-to-day basis. All we see is Saturday when they're out in front of 90,000, and you'd like some validation, and the validation at this point is winning. I mean, it's not okay, we're building, brick by brick. This is the third year. Granted, the roster at certain spots looks a little bit different and it's a little bit younger to stand up toe to toe with Michigan, but you got to start winning football games. All right, football games that matter. And this was an opportunity yesterday to win a game that mattered, because people want it so bad. And I think Rule, I think Schaefer, going back to the quick question you asked about Rule after the game, I just think the physicality of just the one-sided. I mean, I know he knew that that's who Michigan is, but just guys getting blown up. I don't think in his wildest dreams he ever thought that they would be that lopsided, that it would throw their game plan off. It just, and then I think another part of the reality of Rule trying to handle it, to not say, hey, push the panic button after 4 games, but kind of push we got to be better, is they didn't have a good second half when
No.
it was on the headsets. The headsets didn't have a good second half, and that's kind of a little bit of a trend of Nebraska in second halves in these kind of games, where it turns into kind of a lopsided X's and O's adjustment type thing. And, that's another reality check of what do you do the next time you get this opportunity? Because technically, I guess the next opportunity would be USC, but man, you're playing against yourself. And now you got Michigan State, Maryland, you got Minnesota, you got Northwestern.
None of them are
And
just going to give it to
yeah,
you either. You're going to have to
no,
go
and you
earn it
have to,
every one of those
and
games.
the next time, you have to be better. I think this is an important week coming up for Nebraska. I know they won't have a regular schedule, but I think it's an important week, not to be, okay, hey, it was just Michigan. You know what? I mean, I think I think it's more about yourself and trying to figure out what we did and didn't do and what can we fix in the meantime. They can't fix the non-athletic tackles. They're not going to be able to fix that. Are they going to be able to fix the safety play? I was waiting for Deshaun Singleton to assert himself that he could be one of the top safeties in the league. I don't remember seeing much of him yesterday. And the other safety had a bad day at the office.
Yep.
So it's no panic button, but it's a good reality check of this is where Nebraska is. This is where 2025 Michigan is. And how do we close that gap in the meantime before we add bodies?
Yeah, and there's no obvious answer for what
Is that
they have
scary?
in
Is
front of
that scary or truth?
It's just the truth. I don't know that it
Yeah,
has to be scary because again, the
I agree
season
with
didn't
you.
end. The season didn't end
No.
yesterday, and it's the job of that coaching staff to figure out how you're going to win games and to figure out who you are and what you can do to be successful. And there's a part of me that wonders if Nebraska's attempts to try to establish the run fly in the face of who they really are, which is a team with better wide receiver play than they have anywhere else on offense, and a quarterback that can largely distribute the ball fairly well.
Yes.
Are they going to have to lean into being more of a passing offense to give themselves a better chance to win games? Not necessarily yesterday, but just in general, that might be the case. Are they going to have to play defensively in a certain way to give themselves a better chance? Are they going to, I I don't know that they can come out of yesterday and just see that there's schematic switches or even style preferences, because some of it is they just didn't have enough horses, or they didn't have guys make plays. And maybe they will make plays. Maybe they'll make plays against Michigan State and Maryland and Minnesota and Northwestern. And you won't wait, or you won't know what you have until you play USC at home. And who knows? Nebraska could be 7-1 going into that game.
Do you think, and I know that the 3-3-5, we beat that into the ground. Do you see, and maybe it happens during the course of the season, and sometimes it happens during the course of a game, Nebraska transitioned to more of a 4-3 or even a 4-2-5?
So I was thinking about that because I know your partner Matt McMaster asked me on Friday about it. And so then I was kind of watching on Saturday. And if I have like one universal criticism that blends the last coaching staff and this coaching staff, I don't think that they have done enough of a job of finding legitimate nose tackles. And it's not like those guys grow on trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you think back to when Nebraska plays well up front, it almost always starts with having somebody who can collapse part of the interior of the offensive line to allow your linebackers go to work.
Yeah.
And I've talked up Ty Robinson for the last couple of years. He had a horrible game yesterday. He really hasn't had a great season so far.
No, Riley Van Poppel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say? I'd say Todd Van Poppel.
No, Ty.
You
said Ty had a bad day yesterday. I'm like, wow, he played on Saturday.
Riley
Yeah,
Van Poppel has had a rough season. And that's a guy that I expected a lot from, and it hasn't been there. I think Elijah Judy's a nice player. I think in the perfect world, he's a nice player that's getting a lot less reps than he is at Nebraska. I think they're at least one man short up front on the defensive line. I am beyond excited for what William Twinneri looks like at the end of this year. I think he's going to be very, very good. But they just don't have enough up front. And if you're going to run a 3-man front, you've got to have a dude in the middle of that defensive line. And I just don't know that they have it. And I don't know that they have it recruited for next year. I don't know that they're going to have to go find somebody in the portal. Like, I like Cade. I can't even think of his last name now.
Petchak. Yes.
Petchak. I like Cade Petchak. I like Malcolm Simpson. I like Tyson Terry. They're all fine players. And I think they're going to be fine defensive linemen. I don't know that they need a Damian Daniels. They need a space eater. They need a guy who just takes two offensive linemen out of a play.
Yeah.
And they just don't have it.
So,
Nash at his best in 23 was that.
Yeah. And you had a nice combo with Ty and Nash.
Yep.
But again, I worried about this from the time that Ty and Nash walked out of the building, and I'm still worrying about it. So it's not like something new happened. But let's go back to Riley Van Poppel. There's got to be something off, because he doesn't look anything close to the limited times we've seen him play over the last couple of years. I mean, he's getting pushed 5 yards down the field. Yep. And, even if you don't win a one-on-one battle, it's a stalemate. Make it a stalemate where there's a clog in the middle, or at least the guard. Yeah, at least the guards have to pin down. There's got to be something going on, because he looks nothing like we expected him to be, and we didn't expect him to all of a sudden be playing a majority of snaps and look like Ty, but eventually look like Ty and do what Ty was able to do, and he is nowhere close. So that has opened the door for a true freshman to play more. And there were times where he held his ground yesterday, but then there was the reality of, you are 18 years old with North Dakota boy strength going against real men from Michigan, and they took advantage of some bad technique on a couple of plays and wiped him out. It's just, Riley Van Poppel was going to be that guy. Then you could build out from him, and he hasn't been there. And so it's a little bit of a scramble. And, now you're forced to play guys that probably shouldn't be playing 30 snaps a game. I think Elijah Judy is great for 15 to 20.
Yeah.
I go back to the Iowa game last year where he came in for about 15 snaps, and he was really good for 15 snaps. But boy, if you probably got to that 16 snap, you're like, oh, this is where the dam's going to break. So they're going to have to piece together things up there. But they also, I think you brought it up when we first started this morning, is that front seven, because there's another part of the front seven their linebackers, they just have not gotten consistent play out of their linebackers. And their linebackers are washed out a lot of times on plays, or they're not even noticeable. And if they're noticeable, they're further down the field making a tackle instead of within the box.
I like Deshaun McCullough because he's a flash player. He's been better than I actually expected in some regards. He's really, really a weakness for you in the run game. He's just
It's a boomer.
physically can't hold space.
Boom. The boom is great. The bust
Yep.
is uh-oh.
Yep. And then Vincent Shaver's still very much learning.
Yep.
I've been a little disappointed with Marquise Watson-Trent. I thought that might go a little bit better, but he's making a seismic jump from the Sun Belt to the Big Ten, and he's already an undersized guy.
Issue. Yeah.
And he's not really fast. I mean, Brunt said something when we were driving back yesterday, and we were talking about Riley Van Poppel in the defensive front, and he basically was like, how much of it was teams just had to focus and so much attention on Ty Robinson that everybody else got to kind of play off of that, and you don't have that now. Yeah. So you're just going straight up, and your straight up isn't nearly as good as what other teams can bring from the offensive line perspective. So I thought that, and it's not something we didn't already know, but it just feels like you don't have any established defensive linemen. So from game to game, you have guys who are just trying to hang in there and hold up space. You don't have a great back level behind them. It's a pretty, I wouldn't say suspect defense, but I think it's an average to somewhat below average group, and you're trying to make the most of it. And really, it's remarkable how well their secondary is held up with absolutely no pass rush.
Yeah.
Like, they don't get any pressure at all.
And maybe it's a shift that becomes more of a Butler discussion than a player discussion of what can Butler do to help guys? Is this going to be a schematic? Where's this idea of being aggressive? Are they afraid to be aggressive? Because you're right. It is crazy how for the first 3 games, that defensive backfield, and even what did Underwood throw for 105?
108.
108. I mean, that back end is held up without much, the quarterback going down. So it's a weird mix on defense. But again, let's circle back. It's just, you got to make a play when you have a chance to make a play in space. And there were plenty of times yesterday in space to make a play, and it just didn't happen in that leaky yardage. It started to just pile up. Again, 7 runs for 221 yards, 286 total rushing yards. Those 7 plays where it just was a collapse of bad run fit, bad tackling, just poor recognition, and you're hitting your head on the goalpost.
Yeah. And
but with that said, it was only a 3-point game,
right?
That the door was continually open for Nebraska to walk through. And sometimes they would run a play and you'd be like, man, it feels like you should be down 3 touchdowns. Then they'd run a play and it was like, Nebraska's going to win this game.
And that's the conundrum that is
both
covering
Nebraska
this team,
football.
Watching this team, coaching this team, playing on this team. Nobody wants to hear that they're close because we heard it for so long. But yeah, I mean, we just ran through an entire thing, and the way that we talked about that defense, you would have thought that they were on the recipient of the Indiana-Illinois score, and they absolutely weren't. And so that tells me, like, they're going to play hard. They're going to win games. They're going to be in games. But are they going to be at a level where at the end of the season, you look at it and you think, yeah, Nebraska made a jump as a program? I don't know that I'm going to feel that in November. And obviously, we got a long way to get there. But this team has a lot of growth left in it. There's a lot of young guys that I want to see, take step forward. I want to be talking about Vincent Shavers differently beyond just, hey, he had a really nice flash play here. I want to kind of be talking about him like, hey, this is a guy that could be one of the best players in the Big Ten. I don't know if we're ever going to get there.
I'm curious. I'm on the heels of what you just said about defense, and let's tie this into younger guys. Is they've seen these guys against Michigan, and Michigan's wide receivers are not elite either. I mean, there were times where Michigan's wide receivers were running routes, and I'm like, I'm no football knower, but that's not on the route tree. I mean, they sometimes had receivers that were running routes right like into each other.
Yeah.
But does Nebraska start to introduce more younger guys in key situations in that back end because they have a lot of young, promising talent that didn't play much yesterday outside of Rex Guthrie? But like but like Caleb Benning, Amari
I
Sanders,
think he would
those
have played
kind of
more
guys.
if he was healthier. He appeared on the
Yeah.
injury report as questionable, and I do wonder if he was a little healthier, if he would have been involved at some point in that. I think we're going to see those guys. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen more of them, but they've really only played 2 actual games. Like, that's the tough thing about discussing
Mm-hmm.
this team. They played 2 real games against opponents, and it's hard to know exactly what it's going to look like. When you mentioned going back a little bit, how critical this week is for them. Some of it is like, hey, we've got a Michigan State team here. Are we going to have the opportunity to get some of these, younger defensive backs, the Amari Sanders, the Caleb Bennings? We saw a lot of Rex Guthrie yesterday, and sometimes it looked okay, and other times he
looked like a
struggling right
redshirt
there.
freshman.
Yeah, and he had some run fits and things that didn't look great, but he was replacing a guy in Buford that's supposed to be one of your steadiest players on your defense, who had such a bad first half. And I don't know if it was a performance, if it was an injury, or what it was with Buford, why he didn't play much at all in the second half. But yeah, I definitely think they have some things they can look at there. But I don't know that it's going to change the outcome a whole lot of where their running defense is and everything else. I mean, it really just comes down to, you're Deshaun McCullough, you're Sierra Wright, you're whoever, can you make that play? Can you make that tackle? Can you get off the field? I mean, that drive, as demoralizing as it was multiple opportunities for Nebraska to end that thing. And that if the reverse was Nebraska trying to have that drive against Michigan to go just cap that game off and go up by 2 scores, literally what happened when they played Cincinnati, they couldn't finish it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the margins, the gap, whatever we want to call it. It's in there, and Nebraska can see it. They just can't be it. And I don't know when they're going to get there.
Yeah, that drive. So I finally found my note. That drive started at 12:40 on the clock. It ended at 3:54. Man, and they just wore you down, and you couldn't get off the field. So let me ask you this: so 3-1 through 4 games, bye week. The schedule in the month of November kind of probably needs to be a perfect November. But Maryland might be, with a young quarterback, might be a little bit better than we thought. Minnesota, wait and see. They made some mental mistakes in their last game against Cal that usually Minnesota doesn't make. You have Northwestern, which is Northwestern. I mean, it almost has to be a perfect month. And then you get another opportunity against USC. Was there anything yesterday that you were not anticipating that popped up for the good or the bad? Like something that you saw and went, okay, that's something to build on. Or something that, okay, that one is leaking in the boat. Got to put my finger on that because I didn't have my finger on it before.
Not particularly. I mean, I guess if there's anything, it would be I genuinely think Archie Wilson is a weapon for Nebraska. I mean, his punting was confusing for Michigan. That one he kicked out of the end zone for 52 yards was terrific. He kicked it in such a way that there was absolutely no chance for Michigan to return. He later had a punt where he hit the line drive, but he gave his guys enough time to get down there to cover it, that then the line drive didn't even allow the Michigan guy to really move off the spot. Like it, if you're looking for something to feel better about complimentary football, it's usually Nebraska isn't going to go 3 and out on offense a lot. I mean, I think it's relatively hard to get Nebraska to go 3 and out. Michigan did it a couple times. And so because of that, they're probably going to be punting somewhere between the 30 and the other 45. And we can just, there's a red zone, there's a deep red zone, there's whatever the 40 on in is that I think Bill Conley or somebody has a term for.
Yeah.
Do we call the 45 to Nebraska's 30 like the Archie Wilson zone or something? Because he is going to pin teams and really make things difficult, long fields for other teams with the opportunities he's going to get in there. And I do think that's going to help Nebraska. Like that is a margin winner for you, if you will.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sticking with, you got to win in the margins. One area which is still not like we don't have any more answers to, and maybe we have more questions, is the running back position is still a mystery. You know, Emmett
I
runs
think,
hard, but Emmett
yep.
doesn't make people miss. And in this kind of game, you got to make the first guy miss, because there were times where I think Emmett, if he has an X button, he gets through he's got to get skinny in a hole, and then he can get big, and you got a big gain. He wasn't able to do that. And then there's really no support behind him. I mean,
None.
Nelson came into the game. Nelson doesn't play last week. Nelson's into the game in the first series.
Yeah.
And you're like,
I,
okay.
I'm,
I think that'll be an ongoing thing throughout the entire season, that I just don't think that'll be fixed. And don't watch any Miami games if you're wondering about the backup running back,
and
because when Marty Brown's on the field in winning situations for Miami, that kind of sticks you right in the gut.
I'm sort of at the point where I don't even want to hear Matt Rule talk about the running backs anymore, because the distance between what they say and who they think they are and how they performed on the field and who their coach is at that position and how he's done his job and who he's procured as players and everything else is so wide that it's hard for me to even figure out where they're coming from when they talk about it. And I understand that I have been the drumbeat that Nebraska has had a poor running back room for more than a decade. And so I'm playing the hits for myself right now. And he was here yesterday, and I love the kid from an intangible standpoint. I don't think Jamal Rule is going to be a big difference maker as a running back. Like, I think he's a nice guy. I think what you're hoping for is that he is Marty Brown, like a power complementary running back. But that's not going to make anybody miss in the hole. What I crave every time Nebraska plays Michigan, a program that I have serious disdain for reasons that have nothing to do generally with what they do on the field. It's largely just who they are and how they act and everything else that they feel like they're entitled to. Every time I watch Michigan, I think to myself, when's the last time Nebraska had a running back that made you feel it every time he carried the ball?
Yeah.
And it's every guy they ever have. Like Justice Haynes can hit home runs, but he ran through arm tackles. Their backup, Marshall, I don't remember the first name.
Jordan Marshall.
Ran through tackles. I mean, you remember Hassan Haskins in 2021?
Yeah.
And the way that he was running through Nebraska's defense? They punish you for having the audacity
and Edwards
to get in front of them. Yeah, Blake Corum. I mean, he was tremendous.
Well, even Edwards is backup.
Yeah. Like they make you feel it when you play them. And I never get that sense from Nebraska. And really the only guy that's somewhat done that in the last 8 years is like Mills. And Scott Frost forgot he was on the roster for half of the season in which he was their best running back. So, you didn't get much out of that. I don't know what the hell they're going to do at running back. And I like Emmett Johnson, but I think his value is more as a pass catcher, third down type running back, change of pace guy. I would love it if you had another back for him to play off of, that there could be a complementary role. I worry that he's not going to be as explosive by the time you get to November because his legs are going to be
he takes some
overused.
hits.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And he's tough. Like I don't want to take anything away from him, but we're not talking about Emmett Johnson isn't a Big Ten caliber not Big Ten caliber, but he's not a Big Ten conference, first team, second team running back. He's not that. He's a good complementary player. And I think Nebraska needs to have a good or great player at running back. And there's no excuse for why they haven't for over a decade. And I think EJ Barthel has failed at his job. I've said it multiple times. He's done a nice job helping recruit in other ways. I think he's well liked by his players. I don't think Nebraska's running backs have been that good for 3 years under Matt Rule. I don't think the future looks that great at the position. And they didn't want to go into the portal. Their arrogance is stunning at the running back position. They didn't want to go into the portal because they liked what they had. They brought back Emmett Johnson. Quentin Ives. Didn't even play yesterday.
I know.
Don't tell us that Quentin Ives is a Big Ten level running back. You're not even going to play him against Michigan. Congratulations. You beat out Monmouth for him. He ran for a bunch of yards against Houston Christian and Akron. Yeah. Against Michigan, you couldn't even get him on the field.
Yeah, it's we're in lockstep about Barthel. You moved a wide receiver to running back who runs the football like a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And
I like Mosey too, but
I think, but that's not his position. I think the future is really bright for him, but trying to make him into a running back, It's hard to play running back in college. We're in agreement, and we have been for a while about Emmett. I appreciate Emmett, and I think Emmett has grown a lot as a player in his time here. But he is a good. Let's not make him a Big Ten number one running back, but he is a co-number one, and let's find a guy that can do things that he can't do, because Emmett isn't necessarily in the heart of the Big Ten a 3-down running back. But you're right. You get him out of the backfield and you catch it, and you got a blocker in front, and he can turn it upfield. I like that. But if you say, all right, quarterback handoff run game, here you go, Emmett, make a play, he just doesn't have that ability. And yesterday was pretty evident. And again, there were times where there was a little bit of a hole that he just couldn't get that burst to get through or run away from guys. When he would get to the outside, because there were times he would bump it to the outside and they do some outside zone, and he could get around the corner. But when it could have been 9 or 11 yards, it only was 4 to 5.
Yeah. And were you surprised by the lack of passing to Emmett yesterday? Like it didn't feel like they had set up screen. Maybe they couldn't run a screenplay because they thought Dylan would get killed. I have no idea. But you would have thought there would have been some attempts at a halfback screen to sort of try to mitigate some of the upfield pass rush a little bit. Now, granted, Michigan wasn't blitzing, so maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe they're just all over your screenplays. But how many catches did he even have yesterday?
Emmett in the game, I got it up right here.
Emmett Johnson had 5 catches.
Yep.
He did have 5 catches. He had 7 targets. Do you remember these catches?
No. And he had 34 yards after catch of the 5 for 32. But his longest reception was 8 yards.
8. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's I think where Nebraska I thought was successful in the passing game yesterday is when they went with a quick game. They went a little bit up tempo and they got the ball out. So Dylan had been getting it out at 2.7 seconds. And, some of those sacks were on Dylan where he held the ball on. And we know this is a familiar theme. He doesn't like to just throw it away. But I think you're right on the screen game, but probably Dana got spooked because there was no time to set it up. Mm-hmm. And also when Dylan would get pressured, there were times where he would make a bad decision. Like we were just going to play playground and just throw it. While we were falling down and we weren't looking where we were throwing it. And so I think we're going to shelve that.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully Barney was at the end of some receptions yesterday, but they were forced into being a dinker and a dunker, and they just never get unloaded for that big play. But also good job on Michigan's defensive backs. How many times in where we sit upstairs, did you see a Nebraska receiver running down the field open, like free? I mean, you could count them on one hand and you might not get to 5 fingers.
Yeah, and in part because they weren't given enough time to really get downfield to get free. But, I mean, Michigan played well. They deserved the win yesterday. And after all of this, Nebraska still had multiple opportunities. We are over an hour into this. We could go for another hour. I can sense that already. But we will spare you, the listener. You already sat through 3 hours of the game yesterday. You get an hour of Gary and Mike here. You can get 4 hours every day of Gary and Matt, Monday through Friday. We'll have some more Husker 24/7 content. Any kind of final thoughts, Gary? Does this?
Well, let me pose this question to you.
Record is? Yeah, go for it.
A month from now, which team looks drastically different? Nebraska or Michigan? Or will they look the same as we saw yesterday?
I think they're both going to be better. I know that's not your question. You can say both better, because I think this Michigan team will. They're better than I thought they were.
Well,
yeah.
And then I think Nebraska can correct some things. I think the personnel has been there an issue, and it will continue to be an issue. And you can only fix that when you're out of season. But can you help that? But now the situation will be, okay, so Nebraska doesn't have athletic tackles. And you don't have a quarterback that is mobile and is going to chuck it down. He's going to be Bryce Underwood. What do you do to help those guys? Is it more Corcoran? Is it more, sometimes we're going to have to sacrifice Lindenmeyer and keep him in, which sucks because Luke Lindenmeyer has turned himself into a guy that's going to get some attention to get paid some good money next year, to be in a camp or to be on a roster. I mean, he's turned into a valuable asset for Dylan. What do you do to help those guys? Because now there's film out there, and it's not like Michigan, did anything special, but does Michigan State say, hey, man, our guys are physical. We'll just rush 4, or we'll show 5, drop 2 guys back into coverage and confuse Dylan. What do you do to help those tackles in the meantime? Or do you say, you said, does Nebraska morph into a little bit more of a passing team? God, I'm looking at the offensive line and going, no. How about more of a running team and run behind Pritchett? Because I think whatever is going on with that bullshit, okay, and whether he's stealing money from Nebraska or not, because what you're not getting on your return on investment, he's your best run offensive lineman, and I think you gotta play him and you gotta use him, and you use what his strengths are to help your offense. That story's got to go away. We go, okay, how long's Pritchett going to be on this? Oh, here he comes. And he only comes in after Gatula doesn't play well. You know what?
The large chunk of yesterday.
Yeah. You know what? If you love Pritchett as a run blocker, then let's run behind him. You know what? And do what he does best. Or say, guys, you get a mulligan. Interior offensive line, as a threesome, you didn't have a great day, but we still love you. More inside zone. Lutovsky. Lutovsky is one of those also guys that I was thinking big things, has shown flashes of what he can be, but not enough. I mean, hell, he made a tackle on his own player yesterday.
Yep. Yeah. Jeez. So my issue with if you load up to try to run more, you're taking away the best strength that you have on your team, which is those wide receivers. Like, I just don't think that
it's a conundrum.
You're utilizing your assets as well as you can. And I don't know that they need to go to like Texas Tech level air raid, but I do think that this team, I think their pathway to being successful is largely going to be through Dylan's arm and to those wide receivers. So how they do that, whether it's a quick strike passing game, I do kind of wish they would play with more tempo. I kind of, you pointed that out, and I was thinking about it, and they did look better when they did that. So maybe they can introduce a little bit more tempo. And I don't want to like go away from running the football, but I also think like to win games, they might just be a team that averages 112 yards rushing in Big Ten play or less or whatever it is. And they're going to have to throw, and that just might be who they are. The other thing is they're going to have to score points. I don't think their defense, Michigan got to 30, and they could have had more. Michigan State's going to be able to put up points. Aiden Childs is going to be able to put up points. I mean, Maryland should be able to put up some points. They struggled against Northern Illinois a couple of weeks ago, but these teams have offense. Minnesota, Northwestern, we'll see. Those games might be a little bit more grinded out fashion, but I think Nebraska is going to have to score to win Big Ten games too. And I just don't know that they can do that by running the football that much. I would like to see them, and part of this is I've been banging this drum since the offseason too. I'd like to see Gatula at right tackle and Pritchett at left, and that be your starting tackles right now. And, find ways to bring in Teddy Prohaska and utilize them. I know that Gatula didn't have a great game yesterday. I do think he would be served a little bit by playing on the right side versus the left, but we'll see. I want to get this in. That false start on Pritchett, you said you referring to everything happening there with as that is just bullshit. That false start was bullshit. Are we really going to say a guy who comes all the way across the line, even though it's on the other side, he's not going to be in the periphery vision of a tackle? What are we doing here? The officiating didn't cost him anything, but that was a stupid call. And then he got pulled for that. Like that,
I know he did.
He didn't play after that play, and it wasn't even his fault. Like I thought that was sort of a bad coaching decision from Nebraska yesterday after a bad officiating decision. But I was asking, did your prediction for Nebraska's roster, your prediction for Nebraska's record change based on what happened yesterday? Where were you before? Where are you now?
So I said they were 9-3. And, there was a dose of Nebraska being better. There's also a dose of the reality of the schedule doesn't, you don't, keep your head above water with the schedule. So I had them beating Michigan, so they're going to have to, and I had them losing at Minnesota. So that's one to get back.
Flip them.
Yeah, I don't know. I continue to stick with this. There really wasn't anything of concern that I didn't have going into the game that I still don't have.
Right.
It's just the mano on mano, just beating you up in the trenches to be one-sided. I did not expect that. And it happened yesterday, and yet they still had a chance to win, or they still had a chance to lose by 3 touchdowns. That's the kind of the story of Nebraska football in a game that is set for you to break through and you go, okay, now we can see it. And instead, we're going to spend the next 2 weeks of, okay, stop doing the podcast, stop doing McAfee, start coaching football. You know how the tone is. It's all about wins. It's facts. Yeah. It's facts around here. There's no excuses. It's all about facts. The facts are Nebraska's 3-1, and they've lost 28 straight to ranked teams. No culture, none of that stuff. Yeah. You guys didn't make a play when you had a chance to make a play, and it's simple as that. Or to put guys in the right place to make a play.
Hard to argue. I was 8-4 before. I'm still 8-4. I had Nebraska beating Michigan and losing to Michigan State. So if they flip that, I'm in the exact same spot where I was going into the Maryland game.
And I know we didn't get into it, and I know this became a popular thing after the game about Dylan. Dylan gives you enough that you can do enough with Dylan, okay, to win football games. Would we like him to be something different? Of course. Would Nebraska like him to be something different? Of course, but I'm not really sure because he might be exactly what they need for where they're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's another step in growth. And there's probably a couple of things yesterday in terms of the clock in the head that won't ever get better, but he's going to make plays for you at least a few times a game where it's going to give you an opportunity to put the ball in the end zone and score. And I'd rather have that than trying to fight through a young quarterback that is still swimming in it. What'd you think about, real quick, and I know we've gone over, what'd you think of the 98 mile an hour fastball that Underwood was throwing yesterday? What did you think about him in his 4th game and what he might look like in a month or when they play Ohio State?
He's a better athlete than he is quarterback to me right now. This is a really strange comparison because his career is going to play out better than this guy's. There was some like Adrian Martinez-esque things in there where he just lacks touch on his throws in a way that like, there was a couple plays in the 4th quarter where it was bizarre that they were even passing. They were doing Nebraska a favor at that point in time. But he's like trying to throw like a 3-yard out.
Yeah.
You just need to like throw that thing over there at 70% effort. And that was coming in like he was Randy Johnson. Not Randy Johnson left. Like he's Pedro Martinez, just like gassing up a fastball to get by a Yankee hitter there in an ALCS game. Like it was, that ball was booking. And some of those drops were like a slant. And it's, I'm just going to keep using random comparisons. It's like John Elway, Brett Favre level heater coming in on this poor Michigan wide receiver who, nearly got knocked out by the pass. So I think he's good. I think he's legit. I think their wide receiver talent has to get better. I think if they could take Nebraska's 3 top wide receivers and put them on Michigan's team, they would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because they recruited at the position. They just haven't developed as much there. Roman Wilson's like the one guy I can think of where I'd be like, okay, that guy was a stud as a wide receiver for Michigan. So if they can come along there, I think they're going to be a tough out for teams. They're tough. They know who they are. They play to who they are. They play like the Michigan football team that they've been built up to be. And they certainly earned my respect with how they played yesterday. I
think the comp for me is Terrell Pryor from Ohio State.
Oh, that's not a great comp. I don't know that I would want to be Terrell Pryor. Is he going to be a wide receiver in his 4th year?
No. We're talking in college. I mean, his college career wasn't bad.
But didn't they switch him for Braxton Miller at one point in time at the end there?
Yeah, but he also was he was a big quarterback that ran. They ran him a lot. But he also had a tendency to fire fastballs all over the place. I think he's going to be good. I think the one thing about Michigan, you're right about their wide receivers, is if Underwood progresses as the season goes along, I mean, think if you're a big-time wide receiver, isn't Bryce Underwood very sexy to you to come to Michigan, a place that has money and to catch balls from him?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that it should be able to help them in terms of recruiting wide receivers because that guy can absolutely play. Um, it's tough though because it doesn't. It's not like Michigan hasn't been able to recruit wide receivers. It's can they work that into their offense, or can they find the right guy that's the right
Mm.
fit for what they want to do? You would think that would be one of the best play action teams in the country. Do they run really much, if any, play action on Nebraska at all
No.
yesterday? Which is sort of
Mm-mm.
damning in its own thing. They didn't even feel like they needed to.
Well, also, I think there were times, there was a stretch there in the second half where, um, they had I think they made a stop, and Michigan comes out, and you're like, okay, they're going to run some clock here, and they went pass, 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 and they go 3 and out. Nebraska gets the ball back, so I think they're still trying to figure out how to use him. Again, that just adds to Michigan left the door open. They wanted Nebraska to walk right into it, and Nebraska couldn't. They could put one foot on the doorstep, but they couldn't take the next step and then walk into the house. That's the probably to end here. I don't know, frustrating, deflating, disappointing. I don't sense anger. Do you on the message boards or people in
No,
your sphere?
it's more just like almost disgust, like just why? You mentioned
Yeah.
the doors left wide open. It's like they tripped up the stairs and then their body weight went into the door, shutting it, and they slammed their head against the door and then fell
Yeah.
backwards down the stairs. That's Nebraska football when it comes to making a play and the door's wide open. Like they're
That's a great
it's
that's a
it's
great
not
great way
just
to describe
it's
it.
not just that the door shuts on them. There's like a slapstick level of comedy for how it has to go. And unfortunately, until they can prove otherwise, that's the sort of team that we get to discuss week in and week out. So,
Yeah, and and
um,
it and it probably then shapes how we look down the road of now we go back to, okay, until you prove it, I'm not going to trust you, but yet
right.
I like you in this game.
Yeah. No. And right now, looking ahead, I'm not going to change how I feel about them because they lost this game. Like, I still think they have the ability to go beat Michigan State. They have the ability to go beat Maryland on the road. They have the ability to go to Minnesota and win that game. I don't look at this schedule thinking it's this massive juggernaut. And yet at the same time, I look at Nebraska and see some pretty big holes. And I don't
Mhm.
see easy solutions for it. But those holes existed before this game. It's not like
Yep.
Michigan
Yep.
exposed anything we didn't already know. The bigger concern is what are they going to do about it? And
Yep.
how are they going to do anything about it? So that's what we'll find out. All right, Gary, where can people catch you throughout the week?
Gary and Matt on 1620 The Zone from 6 to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. And we get a
All right.
special guest at 9 a.m. every Friday. So stay tuned to see who that special guest is.
Not every Friday. Sometimes he has golf
That's true.
that gets in the
True.
way and forgets to
True.
tell you, and then you're just sort of
Love you
forced to
long time.
forced to find somebody else. All right, Gary, I appreciate it. Thank you for
Great
everyone
shape.
listening. 80 minutes of a Sunday side session going into the bye week. You could listen to this multiple times if you wanted to. I don't know how many listens you would need to get you to the next game, but I am willing to do the math on that and perhaps tweet it out a little bit later.
This is a great episode if you live on an acreage and you're out to mow today.
Hey, that could represent a fair amount of our listeners. That could absolutely represent a fair amount of our listeners. All right, everybody, check out Husker 24/7. More game coverage there. If you really want to dive into the weeds on what the report card looked like or what our immediate thoughts were after the game, you can find that. But you can spin it forward. Lots of recruits were there on campus. Nebraska made an offer yesterday to a defensive lineman out of Key West. I caught up with him last night. That story will be up on the site. Plenty of more coverage coming as well. They had the number 1 or number 2, depending on your service, recruit in the country there. And so we are hoping to catch up with Kennedy Brown and a lot more of these recruits. So be sure to check out Husker 24/7 during the week. And of course, we'll be back with more podcast content